Good afternoon. Welcome to the Diversion Authority Land Management Committee meeting of July 24th, 2024. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Sherling.
I'm here.
Mr. Stamnus.
Here.
Ms. Derrig.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Borboom.
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Mr. Olson. Mr. Breitling.
Here.
Ms. Majo. Ms.
Present.
Ms. Turnberg.
Here.
Mr. Zimmerman. The quorum is present.
Welcome, everyone, and a special welcome to our newest member, Commissioner Turnberg. Thank you for joining us. Normally, what we ask you to do is to step up to the podium and just give like a 10-15 minute presentation of your background in water resources and land management. But in the interest of time, we'll maybe save that for another day. But welcome. We appreciate
I appreciate
you,
that very much.
We appreciate you joining us today. You have before you, or you have had before you, emailed to you the minutes of the June 26, 2024 meeting. Is there any corrections or additions or motion to approve?
Motion to approve. I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And item number 3, the agenda is before you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda or any additions or changes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Item number 4, OIN 7249, sales of excess land recommendation. Jody.
Good afternoon. So before you today are a couple recommendations. So I'm going to take items number 4 and 5 together just because they kind of dovetail together in our recommendations on how we're going to approach the sale of the rail corridor or portion of the rail corridor running through Horace. If you look at this first one, this is OIN 7249. I did pull up a map, so just so you have a perspective of where this is at. This is the corridor that we purchased that's closest to the diversion channel over here. When you see these breaks, just as a reminder, in this, those were properties that were sold directly from BNSF to the property owners. So on this particular one, that 7249, we have been contacted by multiple property owners. All of the property owners to the north have contacted us interested in purchasing the parcel, as well as the property owner to the south has requested permission to purchase this parcel. Our recommendation is that we split this in half. It's a 100-foot wide corridor. We split it in half to the 50-foot mark, and we sell the remainder behind it up to that 50-foot mark. And then for this property owner to the south, we'll sell them approximately 80,718 square feet. This is being sold at the recommended price of 50 cents per square foot. I'll keep going through the packet because you're going to see something very similar with the other 2 property owners. And again, if I can just jump over to this real quick. So this first one is the 7248 and this is 7247. 7248 is a full corridor. 7247, this southern portion or the eastern portion was sold to this property owner directly by BNSF. So that's why you kind of see this cut in half or severed in half there. So going back to this, we were contacted by this property owner right here. They are interested in purchasing this full portion. They're also interested in purchasing this portion along this northern side. All of the property owners on this northern side have contacted us, and in conjunction with Mr. Windmill over here would be on the southern side has contacted us and is interested in purchasing their portion of the rail corridor. Our recommendation is that you do split this in half. Everybody on the northern portion, just like on the previous parcel, would receive their approximate square footage up to that 50-foot mark or the center of the rail corridor. And then for the southern portion, again, we'd split it in half, sell that southern portion to McKinnis Holdings, and then the property owners to the north would receive theirs. Are there any questions that I can answer regarding both or all 3 of them, the 7249, 7247, and 7248?
Yeah, say I got a small question. For 7249, I believe that Southern property owner approached about purchasing that piece of property if they had the option to get all of it, not just a portion, I thought.
They had requested to
Discussion.
purchase, correct, all of this, the 100 feet. Our recommendation, because all the property owners to the north also want to purchase it, is that we split it in half and sell up to that, to the center of the corridor.
So who will purchase the south portion if the,
They will purchase it up to the.
they will still purchase it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry if I was not clear. And then you'll see kind of this little nugget over here, this 4,000 square feet, that's in the road right away, where we can work with the city of Horace to go ahead and plat that back to them for the road right away. We will. There are other areas kind of along the rail corridor, like this is the Fosse property right here. They sold the Fosses right up to the edge of this property. We're not going to kind of go through that process to fix that for them. But in the areas where we can fix it with them, we'll be working with the city of Horace to appropriately plat this. So
One more question. So that purchase will happen all on the same day with all the properties?
say that again.
That purchase will happen on all the same day, will happen on the same day with all the properties?
That's a question that I'm going to leave a little bit up to our legal counsel, and I'll get into a little bit of weeds here. I don't have another map showing, but we had to do an environmental assessment out on the rail corridor, the ESA, prior to purchasing it from BNSF. When we purchased it from BNSF, we purchased it as is, so we were aware that there were some environmental hazards out there. So depending on when we can get a contract out to get the ballast removed and to get Braun Intertech out there and kind of get some of these hazmat concerns remediated. We also then have to go through a process with the Department of Environmental Quality and get this voluntary release occurring on these. Would depend, we might slow roll some of these a little bit, and that might be very intentional so we can get some of those environmental hazards cleaned up. I don't have any concerns on the 7249. There's a couple here on 7247, a little bit closer here to Liberty Lane. And talking to them, they think if we just clean the ballast and scrape off a few inches of the dirt, it'll clear up those environmental concerns. As we get further into the agenda, I can talk a little bit more about it. As you kind of get closer to the grain elevator, there's some more sincere environmental concerns just due to some spillage and stuff that has occurred up there in the past. So, but with these, if we can close some of them out and still maintain that access to maintain some weeds back there, we can do that. But I have leaned pretty heavily on Onstead Twitchell and our legal counsel, working then with the city of Horace's legal counsel, who's also at Onstead Twitchell, to kind of help us through this process. And so it'll be a little bit messy going through this one. It's not a great answer. It's not a direct answer, but.
Does that answer your question, Smith?
Yeah, the basis of the question is making sure that people can get access to the property or access to property that hasn't sold soon enough, because that was part of the discussions beforehand about separating it up and buying it, or selling it and buying it. And
That's
then
correct.
ensure that if someone does buy it, that the DA still has the option to actually get access.
Yeah, so what we'll probably do is a pretty tight purchase agreement and have everybody sign their purchase agreement at the same time. And then that will guarantee that they'll go through with the purchase, or there'd be legal repercussions if they didn't. And so for our newest member, one of the questions is, as we get out here, we have a contract with JT Lawn Services. They help us maintain this corridor. So if there's any weed complaints, and if we sever these off and sell them one by one and we can't get access out there, there could be some issues in being able to access that. The other thing, if we can't get all the environmental concerns remediated, is we are prepared to put a right of entry into the purchase agreement that allows us to cross that property until such time we no longer needed it, which, with some of these environmental concerns, might take a little bit, but because so many of them, and Chris Bockyguard's not here today, but he really is the one that led that charge. A lot of the surveys that were done are not in the middle of the corridor, but more on the edge of these. So I think, as we kind of step through this process, we have to make sure that we do have access to it. So good question.
Could you address the sales price? How you arrived at it?
Yep. Let me scroll back up here. So I don't think we have the original memos in here, but the sales price is sitting at 50 cents a square foot. So when we got the appraisal from the railroad, It's not a negotiable item with BNSF. I don't know how many times you guys have had interchanges with the railroad, but they came to us and they designated certain portions of this rail corridor in here as agriculture. Then they deemed some of them rural residential development, and they had several, I think they had basically 4 categories for us. Then they put on a 15% inflator, probably just because it's us, because I noticed we paid for it, but a lot of the private property owners didn't have to pay for that. And so that price then is the lowest price that the railroad sold the corridor to us. It was also a price that we had had discussions with the city of Horace when they were looking at their Rails to Trails project. And so it's something that I think is feasible and is all the property owners are aware, and some of them did follow up and ask for estimates of what their cost would be per square foot and the total sum of that. So they're all very much familiar with what the cost would be for them specifically in purchasing this.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns? Yes, Commissioner.
Thanks. When you say environmental concerns, what are you talking about?
Like there could be some creosote spills out here in certain areas, and that's primarily what you're going to see down here right along the rail corridor. As you get further into this area, again, right over by the grain elevator, there's some additional hazards that we just need to be aware of, and there's some limitations with how quickly we can kind of remediate that. In our agreement with BNSF, we made a guarantee that we would take care of those, and then with our permit with the state, we also acknowledged that we would take care of those. So that it's just something we need to work with all the property owners out there to make sure that as we're doing these sales, that we acknowledge that that's out there, and that's something that is our responsibility to clean up, but we still need the right of entry to get out there and to clean it up. So.
Thank you.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yeah, Jody, the excess lands policy, it also suggests offering it to partnering entities.
That
I'm
is correct.
assuming no partner entity has interest in these properties?
We did not receive interest. We had to go from a partnering agency. Then the next step is the previous property owner, which would be a BNSF. They declined to buy it back from us.
Right.
I would have sold it at a premium for that, Commissioner Sherling. And then it goes to the neighboring property owners. And if the neighboring property owners aren't interested in it, then it goes up for public sale.
I guess
The cadence.
my point on this is what you're even recommending here really follows exactly the way our excess lands policy says, and who should have first access to it, or for, in the order. So
That's
I think
correct.
this follows exactly as what we had hoped it would.
And in most cases, correct me if I'm wrong, these property owners are already maintaining that extra space because it's basically in their backyards.
That's correct. And so, when we've said we'd come out and take care of weeds, most of them are like, I've been mowing this forever. And then we do have a couple of property owners, I don't want to pick, I won't name any names, but you can see some of these property owners actually have outbuildings in the right of way. And so it's just been a part of their backyard for so long that they've built these structures, and some of them have concerns that if this is sold to somebody else and that property line moves, essentially, that they would need to remove these structures. And so that's, something else. And or they've planted trees kind of up along this corridor. And so really we're trying to just work with the neighboring property owners so that, they still kind of maintain what, for all intensive purposes, they've believed is their property for many years. And then when we come in and say, hey, this is the property line right here, for some of them, they always knew that. For some of them, they said, it hadn't been maintained in a while. And so we've sent JT Lawn Services down there a couple times whenever we get complaints. But yeah, we do have quite a few of those property owners. There's probably there's definitely a few in town. I think there's fewer here along Liberty Lane that have structures in there, but.
Then my last question would be, so who, with the assumption that we would do this, who's responsible for the legal descriptions and all of that when it comes down to what becomes each parcel?
That's a good question, Commissioner. We will take on that burden. And so we will work with them on the particular legal descriptions and make sure when that all goes through. There's a question with the city of Horace, like how this platting will occur and when it will occur, and just some of the complexities of that we're still working through with our legal counsel on that, but we'll work to get those legal descriptions. We already have these ones right here for some of them, like the 7248 and the 7249 on the southern portion. I already have that legal description essentially. It's when we're kind of divvying these up per the property line that we'll need to work with our surveyors. And then we do have surveyors out there in case you get questions. This has been a question that has come up to us from several property owners and from the city of Fargo. You'll notice with our current flood conditions, none of the property owners in 7249 had any questions about a potential flood until the project is complete. When you get up here to the 7247, I had several property owners contact me and say, hey, we think this rail corridor is actually acting like a berm to keep what has been lovingly called the lake to me over here away from their property. Chris did send someone out there, a surveyor out there. I have not gotten the feedback on that yet, kind of what the elevation is. And the concern is if we come in here and remove this ballast, would the flood waters come over here to these property owners? If that's the case, then we'll work to leave that ballast in place until the project is complete. Then again, that right of way will get extended. We'll come in at that point in time and we'll remove the ballast at that point in time. But we certainly don't want to come in here, remove ballast, and then cause any potential flooding issues to the neighboring property owners. So there's a lot of moving parts with this rail corridor. So again, you may see some of these close quicker and some of them might close slower, just because in the background, between the environmental conditions and then the potential flood impact, we'll work through them at an appropriate kind of pace. So, but as long as the property owners are aware that they will get the property and we can get them in an agreement, a purchase agreement, then that closing date can be extended if we need it to be, just so that we can manage those environmental concerns and removing this ballast if necessary.
Commissioner Campbell.
And I'm sorry. One last thing.
Don't apologize.
One last thing.
This is your meeting, not mine.
In terms of these, would a replat need to happen?
That's what we're talking about with Onstead Twitchell. And so just kind of, it's actually, there's two Lucases over there. That's Luke and Luke. And you guys are used to Lucas Andrud on our MCC JPA meetings. And then there's another Lucas out on Onstead Twitchell. It's the City of Horace's attorney. And they're just working with the City of Horace to see, hey, kind of what is the easiest way and to approach this as we go through this. And I don't have a clear answer for you yet today, but we are working on that in the background.
I just didn't know if anything that we did here would need to include the subject to a replat approval. I don't know if that's something that we would have to consider or not.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm looking at our legal counsel and he's not as certain as I am. If it does, we can bring it back. He's not sure. So he's saying a lot of the subdivision ordinances have requirement for the meets and bounds, and that is something that the Lukes are discussing. He's going to come up to the mic.
The issue is that, and I have to go back and look at the city ordinances, but most subdivision ordinances only allow like one or two meets and bounds legal descriptions to be issued when you're dividing property. And once you exceed that number, generally they require a new plat. I don't know the answer to that, so I think that's probably the issue that they're working. They're working through. This is a little unusual because it's railroad right away. It's not subdividing like an ag parcel into a couple smaller parcels for development. So it's an unusual question.
Yes, Brenda.
I know this would be Fargo, but to give you an example, we did this exact same thing in Fargo and vacated about 10 feet of right-of-way that they had been maintaining and built into. Mm-hmm. And so we did the same thing, but what we did was a replat. So it was a parcel as a whole, and then the owners all signed the replat. So it's plausible to do, because typically all the property owners want it anyway.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions online? Then we're looking for a recommendation to the DA for approval of the proposed transfer, and I think we can take items 4 and 5, so OIN 7247, 8, and 9. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Shirley?
Yes.
Mr. Stamnes?
Yes.
Ms. Derrick?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Borboom?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Aye.
Mr. Breitling?
Yes.
Ms. Monjo?
Yes.
Ms. Turnberg?
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you. Item number 6, OIN 7234A and 7234B, proposed variance to the excess lands policy.
So again, I'm going to pull up our GIS map and let me take this flooding layer off for you real quick. So there's one more parcel that is involved with the rail corridor and rail elevator purchase. We have, this is C and this is D, so you can see this kind of goes through their residential. These are not the ones that we're talking about right now, just to be clear. The ones that we're talking about, the two that we're talking about for the exception that will be made for the excess lands policy is just the 7234A and 7234B. And these are the ones where we had a pretty healthy conversation at the June Lands Committee meeting. And this committee did direct us to go back and draft an exception. The exception is in your packet. And essentially what it would allow us to do is skip several of the steps. So we wouldn't be going to the member entities asking if they're interested in purchasing. We would not be going to the previous property owner, which would be BNSF and CHS. And then we would not be going to the neighboring property owners. We go straight to the public sale portion of this because most of this is in an area that can be developed and can be developed for commercial. So based off of that, then you'll see in your packet the recommendation to go straight to that public sale portion of this.
Thank you. Any questions? Well, I think this certainly makes good sense. It would be great to see that developed in some wonderful way and for us to be able to recoup some of our taxpayers' dollars.
And just a reminder, the appraisal for the rail, for this A portion of it, so you're going to be going from Center Avenue all the way up to Main Street, was $1,025,000. And that appraisal is probably about 6 months old now. So that value is probably just going up. And there's certainly, is a different value for the rail corridor portion versus kind of what's sitting on this front seat. This right here, what this is depicting is that the Cass County Joint Board owns the rail corridor, but the MFDA purchased the grain elevator, so all the way out here to Main Street. So that's why you're not kind of seeing this kind of squared off right here. So there's a little over 2 acres that are usable acres just in this portion right here. So.
Any further questions, or is there a motion?
Move to authorize recommended variance.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Shirley?
Yes.
Mr. Stamnes?
Yes.
Ms. Derrick?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Borboom?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Breitling?
Yes.
Ms. Monjo?
Yes.
Ms. Turnberg?
Yes.
And that is everyone.
Thank you. Item 7, OIN 858, land sales recommendation.
So we're going to take you to a different part of the project. So this OIN, it's OIN 858. It's right off of 52nd Street Southeast. You can see in your packet, it's a little under 12 acres. It was purchased a couple of years ago, just about 2 years ago. This price is inclusive of the home that we did have to pull off of there. We're proposing to sell it at $65,000 an acre. That's based off of $65,000 in total. That's $5,500 per acre for flowage easement encumbered. Recreational land is what it was appraised at, so it's not tillable, which is typically what we talk about here a lot. And so the value on this recreational land is usually coming in at about $5,600 an acre. There is a little bit of an access issue, so the new owner will need to seek access easement either from the neighboring property owner. They're going to need to work with the county to install a new field approach, and that will be the property owner, the new property owner will be responsible for that. So,
Is there any problem with getting a field approach in that particular spot? I'm looking at my county engineer.
I'm not quite sure how far that is away from the next access. Usually if it's further than 800 feet, it's not much of an
there's a
issue.
cross street right here. And you can just see the drive right now kind of loops over to the neighboring property owner. This easement is not recorded. I think they can just drive off the street. That's my understanding from people, talking to people who are out in the field quite a bit. But I did verify this. All of this drive has been removed, FYI, as a part of our contract. So they probably had a neighborly agreement with the neighboring property owner because that drive has been there for quite some time. But that has been removed. So they can either, again, work with this neighboring property owner to continue to use this access or work with the county to try to get an access point within their property.
Since that access there is so close, there could be a large chance that it might not get approved since it's so close.
Is it so close to what? I apologize.
To that access that's right next to it.
That has been removed.
Oh, okay.
And it's not recorded.
Oh, okay.
And so I think it was just kind of a gentleman's handshake between neighboring property owners that they could use that. And so that's all been removed.
That increases the likely higher, so.
Yeah.
that might- yeah.
So what is the plan with this property?
So the recommendation is a proposed sale price of $65,000 based off $5,500 an acre. It is encumbered in Zone 1 with a flowage easement. And then the new owner will need to either seek that access easement from the neighboring property owner or work with the county to install a new field approach.
And the adjacent owners aren't interested?
We haven't asked them because we haven't been approved for sale.
Okay. Well, oftentimes you get approached ahead of time, so that's why.
Yeah, I mean, we did just negotiate a settlement with the neighboring property owners, and this was not a property that they expressed interest in. What I do anticipate is somebody's going to come down here and want to use this for hunting. That's my
I would think
expectation.
So. Yeah, I would expect that, I guess if I was the neighbor, I would want to ensure that I was the one that was hunting there and not somebody else.
Yep. And so they'll, going through our policy, they'll have first opportunity before the public will.
Okay, very good. Any further questions? Or a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
So just for clarity, so the flowage easement remains on the property?
That's correct.
And that is why it's 5,500?
That is correct. So typically when we're selling farmland that is encumbered with the flowage easement in Zone 1, we're typically selling at anywhere between $6,000 and $7,000 an acre. Because this really isn't farmland, it's recreational land. And then, you know, if they did come out here, remove some of these trees, they're going to have some compaction issues and production be down just because it's been a residential lot for so many years. So,
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Stamnes?
Yes.
Ms. Derrick?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Borboom?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Breitling?
Yes.
Ms. Majo?
Yes.
Ms. Sternberg?
Yes.
And that is everyone.
Great, thank you all. Item number 8, other business.
do not.
No other business, wow. I think last time we were an hour and a half, so don't let be sure to block off a little more than 24 minutes for the next meeting, just in case. Well, if there's no other business, I will entertain a motion